welcome to another broadcast of Comics Let's Talk. Today we're going to do another top 10 list. If you like what you heard today and you love comic books, you're going to hit the red subscribe button right under this screen. This is top 10 superheroes outside the DC and Marvel universe. My name is Kevin Given, but now let's get to our list. Ever since the 1940s, DC, then known as National Periodicals, and Marvel, then known as Timely Comics, had a monopoly on the superhero genre. There was some fierce competition, but whenever a company began to overshadow the big two, they would be sued, such as Fawcett's Captain Marvel, and or taken over by the company, ditto on Captain Marvel being absorbed into the DC universe. Any real competition didn't last long in those days. Most of the competitors went out of business after World War II, as soldiers who would read comics to pass the time on the battlefield stopped buying comics. Then in 1954, comics were dealt another blow with Frederick Wartham's condemnation of comic books being a bad influence on our kids, which brought about the Comics Code and severe censorship. But in the 1960s, comic books experienced a renaissance, and despite the big two's efforts, especially DC, some titles flourished. Charlton Comics began a superhero lineup that included some talent that would become respected icons in the business. And Gold Key, which usually stuck to adapting known franchises such as Star Trek and Twilight Zone, even gave us an original superhero or two such as Solar, Man of the Atom, and Magnus, Robot Fighter. Eventually, the big two would once again gain the upper hand, as most of Charlton Comics' superheroes were absorbed into the DC universe, and Gold Key simply went under. Valiant Comics would later resurrect Gold Key's characters to mixed success. But despite the big two's efforts, some superheroes have thrived outside of their universes. The top 10 superheroes outside of the DC and Marvel universes. At number 10, Aspen Mathers. Aspen Comics' Fathom is a comic book created by Michael Turner and originally published by Top Cow Productions. It debuted in 1998 and was Michael Turner's first creator-owned comic book series. Fathom is currently published by Turner's own company, Aspen MLT. Fathom begins as the cruise ship Paradise arrives in San Diego 10 years after it was reported to have disappeared. A military quarantine is established to cross-examine the crew and passengers. However, no one on board knew that they had been missing. Compounding the mystery was a girl discovered by the crew while the Paradise was still at sea. The girl could only remember that her name was Aspen. Aspen is taken from the ship by a vacationing naval officer, Captain Matthews, who adopts her and raises her as his own. Aspen has a strange attraction to water and spends much of her youth swimming, eventually making the U.S. Olympic team for the 1988 Seoul Games. She wins the gold, but has her medal taken away and receives a permanent ban after she fails a rigged drug test. Afterwards, Aspen attends UC San Diego and receives a degree in marine biology. She is then invited to study a top-secret underwater science facility known as the DMD, or Deep Marine Discovery. The DMD is a joint project between the United States and Japan. The facility was built over a strange underwater craft of unknown origin, which both nations study to determine its origin. However, the Americans and Japanese no longer trust each other and rely on an intermediary named Kane to share research data. The current Fathom is Volume 6, which is also known as Michael Turner's All-New Fathom, published in February 2017. This includes an all-new creative team: Blake Northcott writer, Marco Rena pencils, Mark Rosland digital inks, and John Starr colors, also Zen, who does the letters. In this volume, Aspen Mathers inadvertently releases a group of incinerated underwater beings called the Typhos. Her identity is also exposed to the human world, forcing her into hiding. Here's my review of issue number 1. Move over, Submariner, Triton, Aquaman. Your male-dominated world of seafaring superheroes is about to be crashed. Here comes Michael Turner's Fathom. Finally, a female seafaring superhero. This is issue 1 of volume 6, and the author is also a woman, Blake Northcott. Now to the synopsis. Here's a fun title filled with catchy quotes and a lot of action. The issue begins with the hero being knocked 600 feet into the air by a blue meanie, water-breathing bad guy. Its narration reveals that this is something that happened in the character's recent past. She's describing the incident to a friend. It seems that her ex-boyfriend had her investigate a strange noise coming from a dark sinkhole. When Aspen went to investigate, the Blue Meanie, who claims that he's a god, got upset. An argument ensues and the Blue Meanie pulls out a glaive. Blake must have seen that movie Crawl and attacks her with it. Aspen changes her density, meaning that the glaive should have passed right through her, but it nicks her anyway. She suspects that this character isn't actually one of her kind, but someone different, though with similar powers and underwater breathing ability. I loved how the battle became unpredictable, with the characters' powers not working as they were supposed to. In conclusion, the action builds to a gut-wrenching climax as Aspen and the Blue Meanie take the battle away from the shore and the San Diego citizens into the deep blue ocean itself. A television helicopter decides to follow them to get the exclusive, only to put itself in harm's way. Aspen notices a tattoo on the Blue Meanie's chest and decides to see if it means anything. Her search reveals that it's not just there for decoration. To be continued. The number 9 superhero not affiliated with Marvel or DC is Eman. Now DC Comics, after Charlton Comics went under, acquired all, or actually most, of their superhero gallery. But they did not get Eman. After editor Dick Giordano left Derby, Connecticut-based Charlton Comics in 1968, the publisher ended its superhero line. A later editor, George Wildman, persuaded the publisher to try superheroes again, leading writer Nicola Cuddy and artist Joe Staton to devise E-Man. Cuddy said in the 2000s that his inspirations included the golden age of comic superhero Plastic Man, and that he wanted to create a similarly fun and whimsical character. Cuddy also admired Albert Einstein and his formula, E equals MC2. He conceived a character who was caught in a factory explosion and became an energy being that could take any form of matter. When he shared this idea with artist Joe Staton, Staton felt the origin was too similar to that of Charlton's Captain Atom, the atomic accident origins that had been used by Marvel Comics editor Stan Lee. Inspired by the works of Arthur C. Clarke, Cuddy created a new origin that made E-Man a packet of sentient energy created as a star went nova. Cuddy asked Staton to draw the costume, only requiring that the character not wear a cape and that the formula E equals MC2 be his chest emblem. Staton based E-Man's face on that of actor Roger Moore, making him appear heroic but somewhat generic, so frequently used in other superhero costumes. E-Man took a light, whimsical tone to differentiate itself from superhero comics at Marvel and DC. Cuddy enjoyed scripting wisecracking banter between E-Man and his girlfriend Nova Kane. Inspired by movies like The Thin Man and Mr. and Mrs. North, however, he did not intend to spoof superhero comics. He wanted to present serious situations that the characters could make light of. Inspired by the work of Wally Wood in Mad magazine, Staton would insert sight gags into each issue. E-Man is a sentient packet of energy thrown off by a nova traveling the galaxy. He learned about life, how to duplicate the appearance of life, and good and evil. Reaching Earth, he met exotic dancer, grad student Katrinka Kolchnisky, who attended Xanadu University. She's also known as Nova Kane, and formed himself into a superhero dubbed E-Man, with a civilian identity dubbed Alec Tronn. Electron. His emblem was the famous mass energy equivalence formula E equals MC2. At number 8, Shadowman. Again, we'll be looking at the Valiant version of the character, not the Acclaim version. Valiant Comics. Jack Boniface is playing saxophone for a packed jazz bar deep in the heart of New Orleans one night. A successful musician and hopeless romantic, Jack dreams of a record deal, but then is happy to realize that a beautiful woman named Lydia has been coming to the bar every night to watch him play. That night, they leave the bar together. They go to her residence, where Jack consumes a drugged drink and falls unconscious, believing this is his last moment on Earth. In the morning, he wakes to find Lydia gone and a strange mark on his neck. Later that night, Jack stalks the streets, compelled by an urge to hunt Lydia down and take revenge. He finds a discarded carnival mask on the street and, inexplicably drawn to it, picks it up. Jack hears the cries of a woman be insulted in a back alley. He confronts the attacker and finds that he has superhuman strength and speed, with which he is able to frighten the attacker into fleeing. Jack's housekeeper, Neddie, a voodoo practitioner, senses the change in Jack. She explains that something evil in the night ripped open the doorway to his soul. Now, whenever shadows fall, his soul comes out, takes over, and goes hunting. She tells him, in voodoo talk, shadow means soul. You, the Shadowman. Neddie feels the presence of a Loa or spirit named Bosu Kobelman in Jack. Bosu has become Jack's metetet, the Loa who stands for him. Neddie tells him that although ignorant people think Bosu is evil, in truth, Bosu embodies a rage against evil and is not possessing Jack, but helping him. At number 7, The Savage Dragon. The Savage Dragon is an ongoing American comic book series created by Erik Larsen, published by Image Comics and taking place in the Image universe. The comic features the adventures of a superhero police officer named the Dragon. The character first appeared as Dragon in Graphic Fantasy number 1, June of 1982. It first appeared as the Savage Dragon in Megaton number 3, February of 1986. The dragon is a large-finned, green-skinned humanoid whose powers include super strength and an advanced healing factor. He is also an amnesiac. His earliest memory is awakening in a burning field in Chicago, Illinois. Thus, for most of the series, the origins of his powers and appearance are a mystery to readers. At the beginning of the series, he becomes a police officer and battles the mutant criminal super freaks that terrorize Chicago. Savage Dragon is one of only 2 Image Comics titles that debuted during the company's 1992 launch that continues to be published well into the late 2010s, and the only one of the 2 that for most of its run has been written and drawn almost entirely by its creator, with the exception of 1 issue, for which Larsen has been lauded. Savage Dragon is the longest-running American full-color comic to feature a single artist-writer. The character was also adapted into an animated series which ran for 2 seasons and 26 episodes on the USA Network beginning in 1995. At number 6, Spawn. Another Image Comics character, Spawn is a fictional character and anti-hero, which appears in a monthly comic book of the same name. Created by Todd McFarlane, the character first appeared in Spawn number 1, May 1992. Spawn was ranked 60th on Wizard Magazine's list of the top 200 comic book characters of all time, 50th on Empire Magazine's list of the 50 greatest comic book characters, and 36th on IGN's 2011 Top 100 Comic Book Heroes. Spawn was adapted into a 1997 feature film portrayed by Michael Jai White, an HBO animated series lasting from 1997 until 1999 appeared. Al Simmons was born in Detroit, Michigan, and a highly trained Force Recon Marine who was at his most successful point when he saved the president from an attempted assassination. He was promoted to a high level, recruited to a highly classified unit within the CIA devoted to black ops. Once there, he began to question the morality of what his agency was doing. Simmons made a deal with an evil being known as Melbogia in exchange for his soul. He would get to see once again his wife, Wanda. However, when Simmons returned to the human world, 5 years had passed, and he had been transformed into a demonic creature with little memory of his former life. After regaining his memories, he sought out his wife, only to find she had moved on and married his best friend, Terry Fitzgerald, and they now had a daughter named Cyan. After this event, the Violator appeared and revealed to Simmons the purpose of his resurrection. They fought, but the battle was interrupted by Melbogia. The number 5 superhero not affiliated with Marvel or DC is Darkman, a 1990 American superhero film directed and co-written by Sam Raimi. It's based on a short story Raimi wrote that paid homage to Universal's horror films of the 1930s. The film stars Liam Neeson as Peyton Westlake, a scientist who was attacked and left for dead by a ruthless mobster, Robert Durant, played by Larry Drake, and his girlfriend, an attorney, played by Frances McDormand, who runs afoul of a corrupt developer, played by Colin Friels. Unable to secure the rights to either the Shadow or Batman, Raimi decided to create his own superhero and struck a deal with Universal Studios to make his first Hollywood studio film. It was produced by Robert Tappert and was written by Raimi, his brother Ivan Raimi, and Chuck Ferrer. The design and creation of the makeup effects required to turn Liam Neeson into Darkman were the handiwork of makeup effects artist Tony Gardner, who also cameos in the film as the Lizard Man in the Carnival Freak Show sequence. Darkman was generally well received by critics and performed well at the box office. This financial success spawned 2 direct-to-video sequels, Darkman 2: The Return of Durant and Darkman 3: Die, Darkman, Die. though they had a different cast from the original movies. There were also comic books, video games, and action figures. Now, Marvel did adapt Darkman into comic book format, but since his origins came outside of the comic book realm, we can include Darkman on this list. At number 4, The Shadow. Originally just a narrator, the character's popularity demanded he become an actual character. Recognizing the demand and responding promptly, circulation manager Henry William Ralston of Street and Smith commissioned Walter B. Gibson to begin writing stories about the Shadow, using the pen name of Maxwell Grant, and claiming the stories were from the Shadow's private annals as told to him. Gibson wrote 282 out of 325 tales over the next 20 years, a novel-length story twice a month. The first story produced was The Living Shadow, published April 1st, 1931. The Shadow's real name is Kent Allard, and he was a famed aviator who fought for the French during World War I. He became known by the alias the Black Eagle, according to The Shadow, 1933, although the latter stories revised this alias as the Dark Eagle, beginning with The Shadow Unmasks in 1937. After the war, Allard finds a new challenge in waging war on criminals. Allard falsifies his death in the South American jungles, then returns to the United States. Arriving in New York City, he adopts numerous identities to conceal his existence. One of the identities Allard assumes, indeed the best known, is that of Lamont Cranston, a wealthy young man about town. In the pulps, Cranston is a separate character. Allard frequently disguises himself as Cranston and adopts his identity. The Shadow Laughs, 1931. While Cranston travels the world, Allard assumes his identity in New York. In their first meeting, Allard, as the Shadow, threatens Cranston, saying he has arranged to switch signatures on various documents that will allow him to take over the Lamont Cranston identity entirely, unless Cranston agrees to allow Allard to impersonate him when he is abroad. Although alarmed at first, Cranston is amused by the irony of the situation and agrees. The two men sometimes meet in order to impersonate each other. Crime Over Miami, 1940. Disguise works well because Allard and Cranston resemble each other. The number 3 superhero not inspired by Marvel or DC. Bloodshot, who was created by Kevin Van Hook and Yvel Fouché in 1992 during a wave of popularity for the Valiant universe, and became an immediate hit with readers. The first issue ranking number 4 on the Diamond Comic Distributors Top 100 for November 1992. As one of the most popular Valiant characters, Bloodshot had a continuing run of success, selling millions of copies until Valiant was purchased out for $65 million by Acclaim Entertainment, and we aren't going to discuss the Acclaim version on this list. Bloodshot is a former soldier with powers of regeneration and metamorphing made possible through nanites injected into his blood. After having his memory wiped numerous times, Bloodshot is out to discover who he really is and get vengeance on those who did this to him. Bloodshot's bloodstream contains 1 billion nanocomputers, enabling him to heal from injuries quickly, interface with technology, and shapeshift his mass. Project Rising Spirit's program to create the ultimate soldier stretches back decades and reached critical mass in the depths of World War II. Though the initial products of the program, crudely enhanced and highly expandable, foot soldiers suitable only for the simplest scenarios, were the early subjects able to complete high-intensity missions regardless of any obstacles. Over the decades, these results ensured that the Bloodshot program was consistently earmarked for future development and continued to break new ground. And the number 2 superhero not inspired by Marvel or DC Comics is Hellboy from Dark Horse Comics, a fictional superhero created by writer-artist Mike Mignola. The character first appeared in San Diego Comic-Con Comics number 2, August of 1993, and has since appeared in various eponymous series, one-shots, and intercompany crossovers. The character has been adapted into 2 live-action feature films in 2004 and 2008 that starred Ron Perlman in the title role. Also 2 straight-to-DVD animated films, as well as 3 video games, Asylum Seeker, The Science of Evil, and recently as a to-be-released playable character in Injustice 2. A well-meaning half-demon whose true name is Anung Anram, which is translated, and upon his brow is set a crown of flame. Hellboy was summoned from hell to earth as a baby on October 5th, given as his birth date by Mike Mignola, by Nazi occultists, which spawned his hatred for Nazis. He was discovered by the Allied forces, amongst them Professor Trevor Bruttenholm, who formed the United States Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense, BPRD. In time, Hellboy grew to be a large, red-skinned adult with a tail, horns, which he usually files off, leaving behind circular stumps on his forehead, cloven hooves for feet, an oversized right hand made of stone. The right hand of doom. He has been described as smelling of dry roasted peanuts. Although a bit gruff, he shows none of the malevolence thought to be intrinsic to classical demons. He has an ironic sense of humor. This is said to be because of his upbringing under Professor Bruttenholm, who raised him as a normal boy. Hellboy works for the BPRD, an international non-governmental agency, and for himself against our forces including Nazis and witches in a series of tales that have their roots in folklore, pulp magazines, vintage adventure, Lovecraftian horror, and horror fiction. In earlier stories, he is identified as the world's greatest paranormal investigator. And now we come to the #1 superhero, or superheroes, outside the DC and Marvel universe. It's The Incredibles, which is a 2004 American computer animated superhero film written and directed by Brad Bird, produced by Pixar Animation Studios, and released by Walt Disney Pictures. This film follows a family of superheroes who are forced to hide their powers and live a quiet suburban life. Mr. Incredible's desire to help people draws the entire family into a battle with Syndrome, a former fan who plots to wipe out all superheroes with his killer robot. The Incredibles is considered to be the best Fantastic Four movie ever made, even though technically they are not the characters in the Fantastic Four. You can see the influence, and this family captures the essence of the family of superheroes theme better than any of the live-action Fantastic Four films, from Roger Corman, Tim Story, or Josh Trank. Public opinion turns against superheroes, also called supers, due to collateral damage from their crime-fighting activities. After several lawsuits, they are forced into civilian relocation programs. 15 years later, Bob and Helen Parr, formerly known as Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl, and their children, Violet Dash and baby Jack Jack, live as a suburban family. Bob dislikes suburban life and his white-collar job, and occasionally relives his glory days with his friend Lucius Best, formerly known as Frozone, by secretly acting as vigilantes at night. That was our latest top 10 list. If you agree with us or don't agree with us or have superheroes that you like that are not part of the DC or Marvel mythos, please say so in the comments section below. Until my next top 10 list, this is Kevin Given saying have a good day and keep reading those comics.